The left cannot produce intellectuals. They can only produce deformities. I'm incredibly excited for this video because this is Ben Shapiro versus a lot of leftist droids. Some of them you'll recognize from the conversation that Charlie Kirk had with them, and Charlie Kirk is a very competent speaker, but Ben Shapiro is in a new weight class, and the fact that they were able to get him to do this is surprising on a few levels. One being that they would even let him eviscerate college students like this. I just cleared a lot of space on my hard drive because this is going to be a long video, so tuck in. This is going to be crazy. I'm very excited to see how Ben Shapiro eviscerates these people, because it was actually videos like this that in 10th grade woke me up in an extremely left-wing environment of the high school that actually turned one of Elon Musk's sons trans, called Crossroads. It was in that environment that a video very similar to this got me to start questioning the stuff that was going on around me and the things that were being told to me. One of the most central pillars that I think falls right before, especially a young man realizes, wait a second, the left is lying to me, is the pillar of counterfeit virtue. Once you realize that the cult of people whose entire claim to dominance is that they're better than those they disagree with, once you realize that that is a fraudulent claim, you can't simply educate yourself. You're obligated to go further than that, in a sense, to understand the injustice that was carried out against you. And this video, which is getting, it's going to have more than 1 million views in probably 7 hours, and millions more on other platforms, could be that for other young men.
How's it going, dude?
Morning. Gosh.
Where do I get one of those hats?
Oh, my boy made it for me.
Nice.
Dude, it's so crazy. You see, basically have a homeless hippie, or one that presents as one, talking to essentially a genius billionaire from Harvard. Oh, man. And by the way, Ben Shapiro is practically a billionaire given his equity in the Daily Wire, which is by far the biggest conservative platform there is.
So, yeah, first of all, we're standing on
Intellectual titan versus this guy. You see, the left they can't produce intellectuals.
stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is
Are you moving anytime soon?
land. No, but
Why?
the fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking
Yeah, but
about
it's stolen land, so why don't you
diversity,
give it back?
equity, and vision. We should.
So why don't
We
you?
absolutely
You
should.
could do it today, right now.
Great.
So
We
do it.
should, but that's not my point
He's
here.
asking why doesn't he do it?
The point is you're saying that diversity, equity, inclusion is destructive.
Yes.
Right. So when we look at this country that is built off the backs of slavery and
Degenerate leftists can only construe the events of history and any dichotomy in the world in terms of power. There's no such thing as, so essentially it is a very low resolution story. If you were to write it out, it's not an interesting narrative. There's no detail to it. It's really quite dull because it doesn't represent reality. And it says the only thing that exists between people is a dystopian, tyrannical power disparity. There's nothing else. And so this is the reason why their concept of history is so broken and inadequate.
white supremacy taking the lead,
This is almost like you would assume that a government psyop has created this, right? This guy talking about white supremacy does a disservice. It's crazy.
building the roots and foundations of everything that you know and believe today. It's ironic to see a black and Indian woman who's right.
It's crazy how the left has obsessed with race for the last several centuries. They were the party of slavery. They were the party of Jim Crow. And now, rather than focusing on meritocracy and hierarchies built on competence, they still obsess over identity, which primarily to them is race and gender. So they are the party that is the most sexist and the most racist.
Rising up to the occasion against society, pushing them down.
Right. Raising up to the occasion against society, basically being competence, an identity based on meritocracy, competence, of course, masculinity, which they detest, masculine billionaire. And it's because they're focused on power disparities. They're focused on race and identity.
Down. And this isn't just the fact that they're black and Indian and a woman. It's the fact that
Can you give me an
those
example of how society
demographics-
pushed Kamala Harris down, please?
the demographic of
Yeah,
people.
that's a great question. Society made way for her despite the fact that she had no competence. They even gave her the nomination with no one voting for her, etc.
Is what I'm talking
Well,
about.
yeah, but you suggested that Kamala Harris is being pushed down by society.
I'm not suggesting that. No.
I mean, that's
So
Okay,
my
boss,
point is saying
I'm
that
sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
good to meet you.
Dude, Ben Shapiro is so nice to these freaks.
Whoa.
You can see some familiar faces that debated Charlie Kirk, and they're afraid to debate Shapiro. It's interesting.
Whoa. And
Hey, Ben.
hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you. So my opening question to you would be, why is that a destructive thing? Why is that a bad thing when for a long time in this country, I feel personally that white men have had an advantage over...
So this guy's trying to gain counterfeit virtue as a result of bowing to the cult and the various altars of victimhood, saying, oh, I'm a bad person because of my skin color. This is actually how perverse the left is. But it's because this guy has no virtue, he has no competence, so he can't gain status in a merit-based system or in reality.
Some communities that have been discriminated against. So why would you say that that is a destructive thing and not, maybe making up for lost time?
Sure. So let me explain what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion.
There's such a canyon of understanding. There's also a nearly inseparable divide instantiated by their worldviews, because one of their worldviews is so destitute, broken, inadequate, and univariable that it prevents them from understanding reality at all. And so when Ben Shapiro explains the full analysis using many variables such as merit, competence, hierarchies are not just merely built on power, to just start the analysis, they instantly construe all of those things as oppression and untenable because they go outside the bounds of their very limited univariable analysis of power disparities.
People like Richard Delgado, who's sort of one of the founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated differences within individuals within that group.
They can't understand anything that he's saying.
And that, to me, is a failure of logic. It also is destructive in that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together or forming...
It's very sad that people dedicate their lives to believing in such a univariable, broken, detestable, reprehensible, incoherent ideology as leftist identitarianism. It's so inadequate.
Policy that is the best for all Americans.
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say, economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the correct...
This is so competent and detailed, what he's saying. They're not able to engage in any of this. They actually believe, especially the women, you're going to see this momentarily, the women view what he's saying as oppression because it's so detailed, it's so based on objective reality rather than the whims and instincts of the perverse and feminine ideological soup that they find themselves worshiping.
Policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all. The diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups that history...
What he's doing, though, here is going to reach a lot of young men because they're tired of having no virtue, no merit to any of the ideas that the left pushes, only threats of you're a bad person if you don't agree with us, if you don't buy into our ideology. Also, I will say that young men are tired of having no actual hero status in the society that the left wants to push. It's all counterfeit. You can't be a good person because manifestations of ambition and competence are considered patriarchal and tyrannical and corrupt. So when young men listen to this and they're interested in a greater layer of truth, they can't find that from the left because the left demonizes those things and they can't abide in complex, truthful, coherent ideas because they demonize logic, reason, and rationality, as well as objective frameworks. They only can find that from what Shapiro's saying. So this is seriously going to change a lot of minds, and this is one of the few videos where that's actually possible.
Does not fall on everybody equivalent. That, frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall on an individual level, right? You and I, we don't look the same. We might have different heights. We might have
this is great. Is he going to call him low IQ in comparison to him?
Qualities. That is just the way that God or nature has bestowed skill sets on everybody. What exactly is the government supposed to correct for? And if you took this entire group and you separated it in half, just draw a line anywhere. It's a circle, right? Anywhere you draw a line, you're going to get disparities between the two groups on either side of the line without regard to race, without regard to sex, and without regard to, for example...
Right, he's pointing out that the analysis is multivariable. The left can't handle that.
But does that mean that hasn't played an effect in that story at all?
The obsession over the single variable, yet again. Widen your mind, dude.
I'm not going to... No, you'd be a fool to claim that, again, past injustices have no effect on what's happened today.
Dude, after that, everyone's so terrified of him, no one even ran to the chair. This is great. Now, of course, that also means that the person that does approach the chair is going to be somewhat oblivious to the nature of objective thought, if you know what I'm saying. Let's see if that prediction holds up.
That was so nice, everybody. Thank you.
It's very dystopian and disturbing, I will say, because at least half the people in that circle believe that he's not a real human as a result of him not agreeing with them. So it's very dystopian. The left makes people into psychopaths.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between
This
racial
girl looks like a girl who had a crush on me when I was, 16.
groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you...
What?
Racial groups are caused. So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Cultural,
Sure.
Yeah.
And so
Right, such as not having a father, that negatively predicts success, etc.
what is the backing on this? What would you say
Psychological literature, objective data, statistical analysis.
contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the amount of hours that kids of particular culture study. So, for example, Korean Americans study
The left can't stand these statements which reference objective reality because they find it enraging. Again, it's because, for the people listening, it's because the statistics reference an objective external reality instead of the ideology of the left, which, again, says to these people, you're good as a result of being a part of the cult. Conservatives at this point in the 21st century don't operate that way. They operate from logic, reason, rationality, individual identity, and the necessity to confront the objective world, whereas the left say, you're a good person just as a result of saying the right things, repeating the right lines.
Amount of hours that kids of particular culture study. So, for example, Korean Americans study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents. This is true, by the way, between white people. Okay, so when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values.
Oh, that's a great freeze frame for what I'm about to say. But they can't even understand or accept what he's talking about because he's speaking in terms of objective statistics. And they don't believe in any of those things. In leftist circles, they never talk about statistics. They never talk about facts. They talk about identitarianism, race-based intellectual fallacies. He's speaking a foreign language to them. They find it enraging because it's essentially saying identitarianism is inadequate. And every time they go outside their echo chamber, they're reminded that their identitarianism is inadequate.
Regard to studying than there are for, say, upper class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural differences are not just racial differences. I think that anybody who attempts to sort of clumsily map that on and pretend that that's all the same, that's obviously not true.
It's intellectually inadequate, but all of what he's saying right now is above their head.
But cultural differences do explain an enormous amount of group disparities across incomes. To take a perfect example, if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. So they're going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just it was a rough way of saying how people act within a group on a large scale. And that is going to amount to
Leftists are pretty much ruled by their emotions, not by their higher cognitive faculties. And this is a strata that is clearly opening up between the left and the right this century.
Generalization, but that generalization is going to tend to...
This is coming as a result of the degradation of the liberal party and really just preying on people, making them more radical and more feminine. So this is the reason why left-wing authoritarianism regimes are positively correlated with a feminine personality, which is an objectively studied fact in psychological literature.
Shall we say, concur. It's going to correlate very highly with outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that these historical disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture in which they're unable to put themselves ahead?
The answer is yes, but it is a univariable. So if there's 29 other variables and that's 1 out of 30, then you're just saying, my analysis accounts for 1/30th of the analysis, which therefore just admits you're corrupt when you try to prescribe solutions based on 1/30th of the analysis. They try to say that this 1/30th of the analysis, I'm just using 30 as an example if there are 30 variables, and there's probably more than 30, that race is the entire equation, when it's not. It's economics, it's gender, it's individual choices, and just the variable of individual choices has so many subcomponents that relate to psychology and deeper understandings of these fields, such as psychology and anthropology, that any attempt to just say that it's race-based is so inadequate. It's intellectually absurd on its face.
You do say that Asian Americans are more likely to study, yes, but we have to take into account that after the Chinese Exclusion Act, Asian Americans were given a certain type of reparations which allowed them into the country. And in order for them, they were given visas, which allowed them to come into the, yes, they were given easier processes into visas, yes, which allowed them into, no, it's a form of reparations, which they were once excluded from coming in. And so giving them an easier opportunity to attain these visas.
So that's not reparations, that's not even citizenship, actually. Visas?
Has allowed them into the U.S. And mainly the individuals who were able to attain those were people with higher educations, which is why it may seem that Asian Americans within the country who come in typically with higher incomes as well as higher educational backgrounds, it may come off as that they are more studious than Latino Americans. But what we have to take into account is that Latin America and Hispanic people have faced
Is she about to cry?
a lot of tremendous setback.
What? Dude, I'm 1/4 Mexican. What is she talking about?
Due to historical atrocities.
Oh my gosh, I've been held back due to history. Shut the fuck up. Like, what is this, victimhood Olympics? First of all, I grew up in Texas, which is considered the South, and I never experienced discrimination even once. And I lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of white kids, there were black kids, there were some Mexican kids. I never saw, 12 years living there, discrimination a single time. So even this counterfeit narrative, which they claim is 100% of the analysis, when it's really like not even 1%, it doesn't even exist in many cases. But their ideology is built on fraudulence designed to harvest victimhood mentality from people, because once they say you're a victim, they can say you're a good person without having any evidence. If you're a victim and you're a good person, you don't need to worry about individual identity, like competing with other people, or merit or competence, studying. So of course, their outcomes are worse. It's incredible that Jubilee actually did this video because the leftists are coming across as so intellectually inadequate.
It's not their culture per se. What you see within
is there any individual agency in here, or is it all historic circumstance?
Everything is based off
That's
of history.
That's a great question, because it's putting them on the defense.
Everything acclimates. Everything is an accumulation of history.
So to take the single motherhood example, for example,
the way.
Well, as soon as Ben Shapiro asked the question, which disintegrates her position, they raise the flags.
Okay, that was fun anyway. Whoa. Hey, how's it going?
Oh my gosh, this is so cringe, dude. And you guys all know what I'm about to say.
How are you? Good to meet you.
So your basis is saying that culturally, people don't have the same advantages, right?
I'm saying that
That's not what he said. Oh no.
Not every culture sort of initiates.
He's trying to boil it down now. He's like, okay, what is the 85 IQ version of what I've been saying?
It's the same action within groups.
So in part, you're saying that you're part of each culture. You know what goes on in each culture to say these things.
No, he says he can. What he's saying is he can read data.
No, I'm saying that I can analyze the activities of a particular group with reference to their actual behavior.
So if you go into my culture,
Wow. So degenerate femininity actually trying to mock Ben Shapiro. That's disgusting to see. They're very incompetent. And this woman right here is the same woman that basically, I think, accused Fresh and Fit or something after Fresh and Fit has saved the lives of dozens of men and made them richer, more desirable to women. The list goes on of the amount of good that Fresh and Fit has done. This woman is truly shallow and pathetic, given she's not helped anyone. She hasn't created any virtue. And so you can really see her reprehensible nature on display when she tries to attack and basically slander men who actually do bring competence. This is a problem because the left-wing identitarian ideology preys on feminine psyches like this, telling them the men who, and they often are almost always men who embody tremendous competence and value to society, those guys are oppressors rather than creating value and helping people. They cause these women to act psychopathically and invert reality. So this woman who's created no value believes that she's better in every single way, even though she's worse in every single way. She's less intellectually capable. She's created less value. She's more psychopathic. She's unable to engage with objective arguments. She doesn't believe in individuality, reason, rationality, and logic. She hates masculinity. So it's truly pathetic to see creatures like this invert reality.
A particular group with reference to their actual behavior.
So if you go into my culture, we're told that we can achieve anything.
It's so psychopathic, and her doing that is going to make so many more young men listen to what Ben Shapiro has to say. Because we're tired of pathetic, virtuous, low IQ women acting as if they're better than others for no reason.
Through hard work.
Actually, there is a reason, and the reason is that they are virtuous and they are meritless, and so they have to make up for that in the counterfeit merit system, which is a left-wing ideology.
We have to work 10 times harder. But you're not part of our culture, so you're explaining something that doesn't have to do with
Oh, this guy's had to work 10 times harder than Ben Shapiro, who went to Harvard Law and is one of the most successful maybe the most successful political commentator of all time.
you. But in turn, you're saying that that culture, unfortunately, does not value the same thing that the next culture does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perception. So
Bro, every word he just said is beyond the intellectual horizon of everyone in the room. Ben, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Oh, that was great. Listen to that again.
Does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perception. So revealed preference is how people act in the world. So for example, if you have one group of people who say, we really, really value our kids studying, and then their kids don't study at all, that would be a revealed preference.
Okay.
Everybody has
so then when you have
to say
people who say in corporate America, you have people who value nepotism versus actual studying hard. What is that called then?
That's basically nobody. So 79% of millionaires did not inherit their wealth, and 89% of billionaires did not inherit their wealth.
So the idea that people...
If you're going to talk about nepotism, the left has no intellectual titans of any type, but their biggest political commentator is as a result of nepotism.
Generally value nepotism over studying hard. I'd like to see the evidence of that, given the fact the vast majority of wealth in this country is
political commentator, basically sympathizer with terrorists.
Not created through
enemy of America, soon to be deported, etc.
Nepotism or through inherited wealth.
But Donald Trump was given nepotism, was he not?
I mean, he's one example among a bajillion people who are very, very wealthy in this country. I'm very wealthy now. I certainly wasn't born very wealthy.
There it is, boom.
Then you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience, can you not?
Happens to be the case.
So, right, so this guy goes back, I'm calling him a guy, whatever. This guy says that you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience as being wealthy since Donald Trump was not self-made, even though Donald Trump was self-made. But let's give the false dichotomy right now so that I can illustrate the point. If Donald Trump was not self-made and Ben Shapiro was self-made, the idea that Ben Shapiro cannot comment on Donald Trump's stature is invalid, because using objective reality and the representations thereof, such as statistical analysis, science, objective inquiry, etc., you absolutely can comment on literally anything. The notion that you cannot comment on certain topics based on your identity, such as race and gender, is definitionally sexist and definitionally racist, but is the central position of the left, which is you can't comment on certain topics if you have the wrong identity. This is a perverse, destitute, horrible ideology. It's a terrible way of organizing yourself. It's the same reason why leftists will often say men cannot, well, they used to say this, they don't say it anymore because it looks so bad, but they used to say men can't comment on abortion because they're not women. You still hear this sometimes. That is a definitionally sexist position to have, because an idea, and I know this is going to resonate with many young men who are listening to this video, an idea is based on the intrinsic merit, the internal logic of the statement, not the identity of the speaker. And if you have any type of experience that I'm having, or I had in high school, where the validity of an idea was often measured by the identity of the speaker, you know how destructive and horrible and anti-meritocratic this is. But of course, the left declares war on meritocratic systems. Okay, I mean, you can laugh at my particular history, but I grew up in an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, California, with 4 siblings in 1 bedroom.
And Burbank. Yeah. Oh, hold on. In Burbank, I'm sorry, but in Burbank versus...
Bro, what a crazy twist of the parallel universes we're in right now, where we have whatever this creature is trying to disparage Ben Shapiro, one of the most impressive men, while sitting across from him arguing that Ben Shapiro's childhood wasn't hard enough. This is so far detached from any type of intellectual seriousness. It's crazy that the left destroys people's minds to this extent. Like what? Is he not enough is he not victimed enough for you or something? It's so perverse. It's so unidimensional. It's so pathetic and corrupt.
Growing up in South Central, being told that you have to excel 10 times harder than the next person, but then you're not part of the culture. To say that you can actually come to these disparities is kind of far-sighted.
The idea that you have to work 10 times harder coming from South Central based on, for example, test scores is obviously not true. We've had affirmative action programs in this country.
So again, obliterated with objective reality, but that's a different language to these leftists, which is the reason why they're losing.
For solidly 40 years.
But now affirmative action is gone. It's out the door. Now DEI is present. DEI is actually saying that we need to have diversity, equity, inclusion. So you're actually putting a footing in the door for different races, different genders, different...
No, you are actually elevating race and gender above merit, which is disgusting. It's sexist, definitionally sexist and racist.
Women, different men, everything. So now you're saying that because this program is going, this one isn't.
Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Oh, this is the same psychopathic female personality that tried to mock Ben Shapiro for speaking objective reality.
Yeah, like a jackrabbit. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
Hi.
Degenerate feminine psychopathology. She's gonna act as if she's his friend now.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So,
One person here is a psychopath, the other person isn't.
I kind of want to shift the conversation about DEI a little bit
She's
away
wearing a dog tag.
from culture, because I don't know if that's necessarily like a helpful conversation to have.
This person is not qualified to say what is helpful and what is not helpful. As a matter of fact, what is labeled helpful by her is the inverted existence of helpful.
And I really want to talk more about representation. So 1 in 5 Americans currently is Hispanic. This country, like it or not, is not a homogenous country. We are very...
Representation. I want representation of merit, logic, and objective reality, not skin color, because I'm not racist like leftists are.
diverse country. Do you not think that our legislators should be representative of the overall population?
I don't see a way.
We want our legislators to be representative of competence. Hello? Oh my, it's so insane. But the left can't distinguish between better and worse cultures, so they can't say that, oh, certain cultures should try to embody competence a bit more by having fathers and working harder, etc.
That you can have a quote-unquote representative legislature with 435 members of Congress in a country of 340 million people, because you can divvy that up however you want. It's not by race. You could do it by sex. You could do it by gender. You could do it by sexual orientation.
So he's pointing out the fact that there's an infinite number of ways of identifying yourself, which is another intellectual flaw of the leftist ideology.
Exactly do you decide what is quote-unquote the representative group? And
It's
also,
called intersectionalism, by the way.
I don't believe that individuals ought to be represented based on group identity. So, for example, I'm Jewish. I don't actually overrepresented in Congress. I don't think that we ought to decide exactly how many people in Congress are Jewish based on the Jewish population of the country. I think that's actually a pretty silly way to do representation.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally, there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not.
If you're not fully represented by competence, then you have the wrong idea of how you should be represented.
represented.
I mean,
We have
that's not
never
true,
had a
though.
black female president. I still have to pay.
Why should we? We should have a competent president. We shouldn't obsess. Why? It would be crazy if you said we should have a president that is white and male. That would make no sense. We should have a president that is good at leading and competent, preferably a background in some high performance endeavor like the military or business or law or making policy. But to the left, it's like, no, I want someone who has the right skin color. This is the reason why when you ask leftists, what is your favorite Kamala Harris policy, they can't name anything.
taxes.
We've never had
Besides their racism, of course.
The whole
president, who
concept is
cares?
no taxation without. We have had a white male president. We've had like
Well,
45.
I mean,
What you're seeing here is the obsession with identity, which makes the leftist position perverse and untenable.
whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate for
You do.
quite a while. We do. Okay.
You do.
So, I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development. Okay, so
Basically, everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism
Do
is
you
also
not
ethnicity.
agree that you were a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the.
So, yeah, that's debated, but it's neither here nor there. This is an obsession on identity that's so low IQ.
context in which you're discussing it.
So
Meaning
what
that-
are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean,
It's so racist. How are we in the 24? Dude, we're in the year 2024, and the leftist is like, her main concern is what is your race? Determine your race for me right now. I mean, she's wearing a dog tag, so maybe, she's trying to emulate that energy of, show me your race right now. Tell me what your race is. Like, but dude, what is going on? This is so racist. Why do you care? Why don't you care about his competence? His intrinsic logic to the ideas? Merit. It's because those things reference objective reality rather than the ideology, the destitute, broken ideology of the left.
so
Basically, everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism
Do
is
you
also
not
ethnicity.
agree that you were a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which you're discussing it.
So
Meaning
what
that-
are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man
Are
of
you-
Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean, that's the more accurate way to put it. But when
What
we're
else would
talking
you be
about
grouped with?
Jews, who are which is an
But it's-
ethnicity, I mean,
So
yeah.
you're not white at all.
I mean,
This
again,
is so disgusting. This is so disgusting and perverse, but I'm glad that the left is revealing that they're obsessed with race. They're so racist.
And it depends
Why are we talking about ideas? This is racism.
who's doing the grouping and how. I've seen Jews grouped with white and Jews grouped with not white. Are we just pretending that doesn't exist? That's a reality. However,
It's
as
so
far as your
it's so low IQ.
generalized point, which is that we are
The left is obsessed with race.
supposed to identify people by group identity. If we don't have a black female president, somehow black females have not been represented. So Barack Obama was in no way representative of black females because he's not a female.
No,
He's
he
black.
was. He was representative,
So
but
he was
that's
half
the point.
representative. How do you do the math on this, and why?
You shouldn't do the math on it completely statistically, but the
Right,
fact
because that represents objective reality. It's oppression. Math is suppression.
is
Well, really what it is objective inquiry reveals the leftist position as incoherent. That's the reason why they're afraid of it.
Do the math on it at all. You should
clearly
treat people as individuals.
underrepresented.
You should treat people as individuals.
well, if you don't even want Kamala Harris to
He's
attempt
explaining to this girl why you shouldn't be racist. This is the current position of the left.
to create DEI initiatives in office, then there isn't even going to be a conversation about it.
I mean, I don't think there ought to be a conversation about why we ought to be represented by race or by sex. I think that we are each individual
And
people
look,
with individual.
it's as if he's speaking a foreign language to her right there when he's saying we shouldn't care about people's skin color. It's so disgusting.
Ought to be represented
The left ruins the minds of its constituents.
by race or by sex. I think that we are each individual people with individual ideas, and if that person
Of course, we know that this girl is an especially destroyed specimen given her online antics recently of disparaging impressive men who do good for society, especially helping young men. So we know she despises logic, reason, as she tried to mock Ben Shapiro behind his back, and she can't stand objective reality or masculinity given her antics.
represents my ideas, I don't care what sex, race, or sexual orientation they are.
I mean, to an extent, yes.
No,
But there
entirely.
is an issue with the lack of empathy in office. We need to be able to empathize and legislate for the
You empathize based on objective reality, not skin color. Again, the obsession with race is disgusting.
people that are living in this country.
I was not
Do you
aware.
not believe that?
I was not aware that empathy is relegated to particular race solidarity.
No, but I mean, it's easier to be empathetic towards people whose experiences you can
No,
fundamentally.
it's not. And everyone who is a good force for change would disagree with you. Martin Luther King would disagree with you. Jesus would disagree with you. Every person who talks about empathy would disagree with you.
Mentally understand based on your identity. Like, do you not believe that people have an inherent bias?
So first of all, I'm
based
not
on
sure.
identity?
I mean, we can start with the empathy itself. I'm not sure that empathy is always the best basis for actual public policy, because when you have group solidarity and empathy based on group solidarity, you're going to attempt to actually benefit the group with whom you have solidarity. So that actually cuts against
But
generalized
that's like a
public
fundamental
policy.
thing that just exists, which is why we need representation in government. Okay, cute. Thank you.
Whoa. I mean, yeah, she is psychopathic. So actually gets destroyed and owned here.
Okay, cute. Thank you.
What she just did is the furthest thing from cute. Racism is not cute. That girl is a racist, incompetent, degenerate female.
Well, he got it this time. All right, nice. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you, Ben?
It's been a day.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like an interesting setting being surrounded by 20 people that disagree with you.
I mean, the truth is I grew up in LA and then I went to law school in Cambridge, so,
So
I'm
you
a
have a lot
little
more
used to it.
than
It's
20.
not, yeah. I've been here before.
Anyways, let's talk about DEI. Do you think that Trump should have won 2016? I'll wrap it in. It's conceptually relevant. I'll demonstrate the relevance.
Okay, sounds good. By what measure? Do I think he did win, or do I think he should have won?
Do you think he should have won?
I mean, yes, I'm happy that he won. If the question is, am I happy that he won? I'm happy that he won.
Okay. Well, I'd say that Trump won 2016 because
By
of
the
a-
way, I did not vote for either candidate in 2016. That's a decision made in retrospect.
Awesome. So I think that Trump won 2016 because of a modality of DEI. Essentially, what I'd say is the Electoral College, right, strives for inclusion of smaller states with lower populations by overrepresenting them in the overall vote.
No, that's not how the Electoral College works. But this is referencing the structure of republics going back literally thousands of years since Rome. So actually technically before Rome. But let's be honest, this guy's had a really rough time on the internet in the last couple of months. He's basically been dunked on by every midweight intellectual or political commentator when he's tried to debate them. He's just been obliterated.
Like, you could correct me if I'm wrong, or the SAN fact checkers can. I'm pretty sure that over the last 25 to 30 years, Republicans have won the presidency given the Electoral College, not given the overall popular vote. So if you're against DEI, if you don't want inclusion on the basis of race, inclusion on the basis of gender.
There it is. It's not inclusion on the basis of race or on gender. It's the structure of a republic. So he's just debunked himself.
Or even what you're saying earlier, we could even say inclusion on the basis of class. Why do you want inclusion on the basis of population, rural areas, states,
We should actually
etc.
use a better
in the
example. Why don't you just
Electoral
ask if I
College?
believe in the U.S. Senate? Right,
The U.S.
is a better
Senate, this would
example.
also apply to the U.S. Senate.
Right, okay, so let's use the U.S. Senate because the U.S. Senate is actually even more unrepresented.
Bro, the big daddy's talking here, bro. Listen up. You're about to get intellectually dominated.
Of the general population than the Electoral College, which is at least a rough approximation.
It'd just be funnier to hear you say that you shouldn't have voted for Trump in 2016. But we could talk about.
I mean, that's a different subject, but
Yeah.
I'm very happy
You already said that. That's not funny.
that he won, even though I didn't vote for him. I mean, we can talk about Trump later.
Yeah.
We've already done a bit. Well, I'm sure we'll do more. As far as the idea that every elected body has to be elected based on population as opposed to based on the...
The left isn't obsessed with ideas, though. Again, he just admitted that he wants a soundbite, which is so synonymous with the low IQ, CNN, MSNBC, anti-intellectual, anti-reality sentiment of the entire left.
area of geographic distribution or the states that actually pre-existed the federal government. Okay, the way that the Constitution of the United States was created was as a contract between sovereign states, which is one of the reasons why, for example, you have a United States Senate as opposed to just a House of Representatives. So is that a form of...
The people that are surrounding him right now, all these leftists, don't even know what he's talking about. They couldn't define what the House of Representatives are. They couldn't define how that's different from the executive branch. They don't know what those words or terms mean.
DEI, that seems like a stretch to me. The kind of DEI that I'm talking about specifically would be separating human beings based on inherent characteristics, like, for example, race, as opposed to suggesting that the United
Right,
States...
that's one of the big differences, is differentiating people on an immoral basis versus a moral and just basis. So the left inverts reality and construes immorality with morality and justice all the time.
Which is obviously unrepresentative of the general population in many ways.
Seemingly my point
It's
is
somehow
that this
bad.
is
That's
just
a check and balance, right?
Well, seemingly my point is that this is another modality of DEI. I've no problem with you explaining to me, right, why the Senate or the Electoral College would be given the U.S. Constitution and some contractual agreement that they had between the sovereign states. That's fine. But what I'd say is that your claim here would just imply that the Constitution upholds DEI within our electoral processes.
If your claim is
so, do you think that the Constitution upholds DEI in the sense of including smaller states with less representative populations?
That is a true stretch.
Bro, he's talking to a guy that honed his debate skills at Harvard Law. That type of conflation is just not going to fly.
Meaning of DEI, but I get your point. I mean, if the idea is that the only thing that is not pure DEI in a democratic context would be sort of popularly represented votes, then I think you can make the case that basically you should get rid of every representative institution. We should go to a pure democracy because...
Well, I'm not making a case for what we should replace it with. I'm making the case that it would uphold DEI. We could talk about, right, what other systems should function in the case of the Electoral College or in the case of the Senate, but that's a completely different conversation than...
No, it's not, because they're based on separate presuppositions.
Are these systems upholding DEI?
So again, I think that you're definitionally stretching DEI. If DEI is the basic idea that all disparities equal discrimination and must be rectified by government interventionism, which is sort of the definition, then stretching that to mean the Electoral College seems like you're going pretty far afield to defend a very broad concept as specifically badly applied.
Wait, 1 second. I don't think that we need to say that DEI is equivalent to disparities equal discrimination. We can
Yes, that is what DEI is. That is actually the thesis of DEI, is rectifying race-based inequities, gender-based inequities. That is the definition of it.
see that DEI is...
So he's contradicting himself in order to wrap himself in a pretzel to still not make sense.
like a qualm for disparities in general, right? And what we apply here in this certain modality when we're talking about the Electoral College, when we're talking about the Senate, is we're trying to qualm the disparities of the lack of population in rural areas.
No, I mean, it seems to me like the argument that you're making is that in order for there to be calm and sort of conciliation inside the United States, particular racial groups have to be given particular benefits. Okay,
Well,
because that was the argument with regard to the states in the United States, right? When the Constitution was formed, the way that you came to an actual agreement in the Constitutional Convention is states were not going to sign on unless they got particular guarantees of the interests of those particular states, right? So if you're claiming that that's DEI, then the response that I would have is right, because that's how you have to come to an agreement. So if you're going to make the parallel argument with regard to DEI in, for example, the racial context,
Harvard Law versus TikTok, bro.
you then have to make the case that the only way that you can have conciliation in the United States is for particular racial groups to be given specific racial benefits, and otherwise the country is going to split apart, which is an argument with which I generally disagree, even if I agreed with the way the Constitution was formed.
Wow, totally. I mean, that's a masterclass what he just did to him.
You made it. You're good.
Oh, look at that guy bowing to the other identity class.
You can relax.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Hello. Nice to meet you. Oh wow, you look better in person. Okay, so
That's very sweet of you. I don't often get that, so thank you.
Okay, it's fine. How do you define abortion really quickly?
Abortion would be the forcible termination of an unborn human life.
Yes, but why do you hold that definition? Would you not assume something like a
asks for definition, receives definition. But why? Why does reality have to judge me? You know she says that a lot to herself.
Like a C-section would be considered an abortion.
No, because the baby is born alive. So how would that be an abortion?
What does the definition of abortion have to include the death of a fetus?
Because that's literally the definition of abortion.
It literally.
Oh, okay. So we've reached the part where we really see reality just separating ourselves, and we see this, of course, in the mind of an identity which receives the most amount of counterfeit virtue, telling her that she doesn't have to make sense or contend with reality. And so this is where you see it really getting incoherent. This is the left on full display, guys. She just asked why the definition of abortion has to involve the ending of the baby's life. Wow.
It really isn't, though. Where are you getting this definition from?
Where are you getting your definition from?
Let's go to do you in Mayo Clinic, any fucking hospital you've ever gone to before?
A C-section ends with the birth of the child.
Right, but
I know,
but abortion,
both I and all three of my siblings were born via
generally.
C-section.
Yeah, I understand this.
I'm here. I'm talking to you.
I know, baby.
Thus I was not aborted.
I understand this, but yes, but no. Well, yes, but no. But no, you could simply say that abortion is simply the ending of a pregnancy, right? So the ending of a pregnancy outside of the natural birth of a fetus. So I don't see why you would say that it would have to end in the death of a fetus, which is why I'm pro.
That's a definition of abortion, actually.
Abortion, all 9 months.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be an abortion.
Right? Because say if a woman is not able to pass a fetus in the natural way, we could have these other abortion.
Did you just say pass a fetus instead of giving birth? Leftists are destroyed people. These people, she's not going to reproduce, but her resentment will grow. And it will eventually boil over, where you see leftists resenting those who do have families and are embodying reality. You're already seeing their resentment, of course, directed at people who embody reality, but when they're this cognitively destroyed, reality is simply an unbearable force for them.
Processes that would say she needs some type of induction that doesn't include the actual natural expulsion of a fetus, but it doesn't always end in the death of a fetus. So I don't see how you could say that Kamala Harris' stance is immoral in this sense.
I just don't understand how you're removing the death of the fetus from the equation about abortion. That's literally the entire moral issue. You and I would not even be arguing if we were talking about C-sections or about natural birth.
But it seems like at its core, though, we disagree on what the inherent definition of abortion is.
You could leave away. We could very easily solve this. Let's just not talk about the word abortion. Let's talk about the forcible termination of a baby.
Okay. So then what do you value in the fetus then?
The life of the fetus.
Dude, leftists are broken. They're cognitively wrecked. They're not required to engage with reality in their echo chambers, and this is how they embarrass themselves in front of millions of people like this. This is completely insane. But what you're seeing here isn't just an insane person. You're seeing what the left creates, and this is really what is going to drive home the conversion of a lot of, especially young men, but women too. When they see a woman like this, and they don't want to end up like her. They don't want to say things like, abortion has nothing to do with the death of the fetus or the baby. It's self-evidently absurd, but the left induces this.
Okay, so then when is this? You said it begins at conception?
Yes.
And why is that?
Because that is literally the biological definition of when an independent life begins.
Yes, but why does it have moral value?
It has moral value because that's literally the biological definition of when a human life begins.
Right, but why does that have moral value, though?
Okay, why does any life have moral value?
So he already answered her. She asked the same question again, and so he asks her the same question.
I would value sentience.
But why?
Right, because
based on what?
This is simply what we value, you and I value. Is it okay to unplug?
No, it's not.
Like a brain dead patient, for example.
I mean, the question is whether it's okay to unplug the brain dead patient. Actually, quite a controversial one in sort of religious circles.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as why, I'm just wondering.
So he just demonstrated that she's incorrect, that they don't agree on that. But also, if you're in a coma and could potentially recover from the coma, just because you're not sentient doesn't mean that you should lose your life and you still have value. Though, in the same way that a fetus or baby will eventually have consciousness. So she proved herself wrong there. It's very pathetic.
If somebody's in a coma and they're going to wake up, do you have the right to unplug them?
Well, coma's not brain death, though. We know that there's future sentience there. It would be a matter of a contract.
Right, so future sentience. She just acknowledged that is the benchmark, and now she's going to get owned by her own definition.
Past future.
Because they're not intellectually serious and can't think using logic, reason, and rationality, because they demonize those mechanisms as masculine and patriarchal.
I'm sorry, past, present, and future sentience. A person in a coma has.
I agree, and guess what? Fetuses also have guaranteed future sentience.
Well, no, because you're only valuing.
Well, yes, definitionally speaking.
One half of the conjunct. That's not right. So it would be past, present, or future.
Now you're changing the topic. I mean, we started with what's the value of the fetus.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Leftists are an unrecoverable wreck, dude. You're seeing in front of you why they have no public intellectuals. Because if an intellectual tried to rise up the ranks of, let's say, intellectual rigor using logic, reason, and their scholarship, then they would have no audience because these people aren't able to think. This is the reason why they have no intellectuals. And we have Jordan Peterson. We have literally endless droves. Our bench is stacked when it comes to intellectuals, bro. Every religious scholar, every scientist, It's incredible.
Yeah.
Harvard law versus identity. I can't say that on YouTube. Let's go.
So on the topic of abortion, I think we have a big focus on the moral aspects of abortion, but I do think we should talk about
right, and that's untenable to her because morality references objective reality. It's untenable. All objections the left has with conservative positions reference the fact that conservative positions are based on objective reality. Leftists don't believe in objective reality because they detest notions of objectivity, but they also can't stand individual identity and the necessity thereof of the individual to engage with objective parameters. They can't stand coherence, logic, reason, rationality, etc.
legal aspects of life, because when a baby is born, two things happen: birth certificate, social security card. When there are fetus, when it's like cells in the body, you don't get the birth certificate, you don't get a social security card because it's not alive, it's not born yet. Therefore, when it comes to like the moral repercussions of having abortion, I feel like that's very...
You could easily demonstrate in the abstract, although you don't have to go this far, that if you were to not bestow a baby with a birth certificate, such as is very common when a baby is born at home and not a hospital, they don't get a birth certificate right away, that they, under this argument, would have no moral worth or have no value, have no person status. The idea that person status comes from the government is thoroughly perverse and dystopian, as well as evil, but it's no surprise that the left would say something like this.
Very different than legally, because if a cluster of cells in a woman was equivalent to a baby, I should be able to have tax deductions on that kid. I should be able to have child care from the government. I should be able to have child support from the father. But since...
well, I would agree with tax deductions, because I actually think that there should be tax deductions for women having children to incentivize children, but you are not entitled to government handouts, which is the second part of what she said. So that part is incorrect, because you're not entitled to handouts.
Like the clusters of cells is in fact not a baby. I feel like morally, you can say whatever, but legally, a clusters of cells is not like...
So sort of hiding behind the legal positivist position, I think, to shield against the morality here.
She doesn't understand any of the words that he just said.
There is a problem, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So when it comes to, first of all, don't threaten me with a good time. I'm perfectly happy to have people pay paternity for children that are currently in utero. Like that's fine with me. In fact, I think that'd be quite good. I think it would incentivize fathers to stay with the mothers and actually be more responsible.
There it is, yeah.
But if we're talking about legal status, there are plenty of people in the United States, for example, who don't have legal status right now, who don't have a social security card, for example, in the United States. Obviously, we can't kill them. They're legal immigrants. We shouldn't murder them. There are lots of people in the legal status does not, in fact, equate to moral status in any sense of the term. I mean, that it's true, for example, that children can't vote and don't actually have control over any of their decision making. Right? I have 4 kids of my own, and I control their decision making because they're very small. Okay, that doesn't mean that I get to kill them. So the idea of legal status, thus being the basis of a moral status, is putting the cart before the horse. The truth is that it's because things have a moral status.
Harvard law versus DEI. I mean, you're seeing it in front of you.
That we give them a legal status, and obviously you can see that state by state, right? For example,
it is what it is. Oh, and this is before Harvard was corrupted by you know what.
Even in the state of California, they had something called Lacey's Law for a while. I think it's still applicable, where if somebody killed a pregnant woman, that could be treated as a double homicide in criminal law. Okay, that sort of stuff applies all over the United States. So using the legal as a substitute to sort of evade the moral question ignores the fact that people make law in the states based on what their moral perception of the issue is. The law follows the moral perception, not the other way around.
Yes, I agree, but I think there is a problem with the moral perception, especially when you consider that...
There it is, yeah. She admits what I said earlier at the start of this, which is that the left detests objective morality. They can't stand that morality references reality instead of their ideology.
Morality varies all across America. It's
right,
not
they are morally relativistic.
Uniform anywhere.
And so the right to choose is obviated by the acknowledgement of a
she doesn't know what that word is.
Moral status on the part of the child, and vice versa. Right? If you're willing...
I'm so surprised Jubilee actually allowed him to do this to their constituents. This is incredible.
Hey, appreciate you being here and having an open discussion.
Yeah, you bet. It's fun.
Let's say that just hypothetically, right? Baby's born. Mm-hmm. Baby, mama can't feed the baby. She's not breastfeeding.
What is this hypothetical?
Feeding. Baby dies. Morally, do you feel like that would be better than if the baby would have just been like aborted?
This is so bizarre and antithetical to reality.
Before it was born?
I mean, I'm not sure that there's any... I mean, I think that it's significantly worse to purposefully kill a child rather than accidentally or through circumstances kill a child.
Not accidentally, right? She cannot...
She didn't purposefully kill the child.
She can't afford it, right?
I mean,
she can't afford to have the baby. And so
the idea that, okay, so if that's his argument, it's a very low IQ argument, because the idea that you can't afford to feed a baby when there are literally churches and charities everywhere, as well as you're living in the richest country the world's ever seen. If you're on food stamps, if you have EBT or whatever, you can easily buy literally hundreds of dollars worth of groceries a month that the government insures you. So this is a very poor argument that women simply can't afford to have kids and they can't afford the caloric intake. If women could afford the caloric intake 1,000 years ago, and it is now 1,000 times easier to get calories than it was 1,000 years ago, then you have no argument. So it was that easy to debunk what this guy was saying. But the left doesn't try to structure their arguments based on rationality in the details. Instead, it's only emotion and incoherence.
You're saying that Kamala Harris is extreme, but your stance is that women are being forced.
You're saying Kamala Harris' stance is extreme. Let me provide this extreme case, which doesn't exist and is not mapped onto reality at all, as if, yeah, it's crazy.
To have children, even if they decide that for whatever reason, I don't care. I don't care.
Why don't you care? Why don't you care? Because you give me a very specific example.
Because it's not between me. Because it is not between me.
Right, but
it is between that mom, her health, her relationship with whoever she believes in. It is not on me.
Here's sort of the problem. You're extrapolating from a very emotionally laden example to everything. And I'm wondering how you're doing that. So you give me a case in which you have a woman who, for whatever reason, literally cannot feed her child. For some reason, adoption's not available. There are no food stamps. There's literally nothing. She's in a desert by herself, and the baby's going to die. Is that abortion equivalent to a woman who decides to, because she doesn't want the baby for economic reasons or because it's going to crimp her?
So it's just explaining to this guy why his argument is completely salacious.
Why is that? Like, whatever, you said you don't care about the reason at all. That's your words, not mine. So she's 15 weeks pregnant. She wants to kill it. That's the same? Why?
You're asking me why it's the same. I'm asking you.
Yeah, he's asking you why.
Why isn't it the same? Why is a baby who
I think it's pretty self-evidently the same, not the same.
Can't be born say that if she doesn't want to, if she says that I can't economically afford this child, that's like somebody going and saying, I can't economically afford this car, and the car salesperson still taking them on a test drive. Like, what's the point if they've already told you that?
Whoa, no, babies are not equivalent to cars.
They are not going to be able to economically afford it unless you give them, like you said, okay, what about abortion? Well, there's how many people in foster care that aren't being adopted right now today? All right,
should we kill them or what?
I'm not saying we should kill them. I'm just saying that should we wait at least until
would it have been better if they were dead?
Those people. You tell me.
No, you tell me. You're the one who's suggesting that's a matter of moral apathy, whether those kids were born or not. I don't think so.
So if kids are in foster care are not being treated well, they're being abused. They're not being fed.
That is a
Are we really going to take this position?
Locked. The fridge is being locked, and they're told they can't go get it because there are people who are only in it because they're getting a check. You're saying that is morally
superior to killing them? Yes.
Before they're born. So you're saying that torturing a human being who's born, like they're a real life human today.
No, I'm not the one in favor of torture. You're the one in favor of unborn people being killed.
Yeah, they're not intellectually equal.
The only way you survive is food and water, and you rely on someone else to provide that to you, and they're not providing it to you. What would you call that?
I'm confused by.
I know you are because your argument contradicts itself.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, the argument that you're making is that a born child deprived of food and water never should have been born. No, I don't see why that follows.
That's not my argument. My argument.
Thanks a lot. Well, okay, we're gonna take this chair. Look at that.
Hey, Ben.
Like a bro, my friend. All right.
How's it going?
Let's break open
first question, can men get pregnant?
Men cannot get pregnant.
Okay, awesome. So
definitionally.
Definitionally, okay.
No, that's not the word he used. The word he used was definitionally.
Do men experience SA? Sexual assault?
Sure.
Got it. What about the existence of trans men?
What about the existence? Do you mean women who believe that they are men? What are we talking about here? Women experiencing gender dysphoria?
So my other question is, do you benefit from white supremacy in any way, shape, or
form?
form?
Dude, what is this?
I'm going to need more specifics on what you mean by white supremacy.
Here, let me give it to you then.
Sure, please.
So I'm a transgender man.
Okay.
I've experienced SA.
Okay.
And abortion rights affect me directly.
Dude, we can tell you're not well, dude. It's really fucking bad.
So if we're talking about the American dream that you live, why don't I have access to that? Because there's no legislation, in the history of America, that legislates a man's body, so why does mine have to be legislated?
Dude, this is crazy. This is so low IQ.
I've got a vagina.
I'm not interested.
Why is the government serving you? I have a vagina. Oh my gosh, bro.
Interested in what your genitalia are.
Clearly you are. I mean, it's all over everything you make, buddy. I'm sorry. I hate to say it to you, but
I think you can read on my face that I radically am not. I think you can read on my face that I radically am not. When we're talking about abortion...
No, I don't. I mean, you can present it here, but in most of the content that you have, you attack my community constantly. And you don't even realize guys like me exist, who actually share a lot of similarities to you and everything, because I'm a married man.
No, you have nothing in common with this guy, actually. Zero. Actually, literally zero.
20 years.
Yeah.
Got
I
a wife.
Recognize that you exist. I disagree with your claim that you're a male.
Right, so if I was sexually assaulted, right, and I didn't have access to that abortion care, do you believe that I should have carried that child to term because I was sexually assaulted?
I mean,
No, I just want to make sure that that's what you believe. Because as a transgender man, I have seen your side of the entire political debate, never ever having the conversation of what an American freedom is. Because why am I not allowed to live my American freedom as a man? You know, I mean, you get...
Dude, this is crazy. Why am I not allowed to kill kids? Well, I pretend to be a guy. That's the thesis that we're going forward with.
As a man, you're really moving around terminology very wildly here.
And so are you, because that's the tactics you play in your game. And you've done it the entire time. You jump from one subject to the next. You speak so fast, and I know how you work. So how does it feel to have it in your face?
Oh, well, I mean...
Because I'm sick and tired of the shit that you have put against my community, especially black trans women.
Dude.
Because
this is really just an embarrassment. But it's unsurprising to see the lowest IQ elements of the left, like, thinking, oh my gosh, that was an own moment. Because they don't know what the words that they use mean. They don't know what the terminology means at all. They think that emotionality is the same thing as making arguments. Ben Shapiro is just letting this guy destroy himself. That's what's happening here. It's really funny. It's just hilarious. Because they don't realize that they're humiliating themselves enormously in front of millions of people that are going to see this.
Because you constantly disregard all of our needs and then use us politically as a pawn when we're 1% of the population. Why not focus
you're less than 1% of the population.
On the economy itself? All of us are struggling, and you want to focus on trans people. You want to
vote Trump.
Focus on a black woman when this is clearly a glass cliff situation. America's falling apart, and let's give it a woman right when it's all falling apart when we had, 50 men run it and it looks like shit?
Yeah, this is not an argument, dude. This is bad. But again, this is the reason why leftists don't have intellectuals. They don't have people of renown. They don't have impressive people. They only have, really psychologically unstable, neurotic, emotionally chaotic people. This is a disgrace. This is an embarrassment. This is the reason why men are leaving the left, because they see this and they think to themselves, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to be a part of this? There's no way.
That we're heading. I mean, it's so funny to watch white supremacy just fall apart the way that it is, and you ride so hard. Because guess what? In other countries around the world, women are not having children. And why is it? Because of the patriarchy and all the violence that men perpetuate. And
this is doing damage to leftist position. This is the reason why Ben Shapiro is letting him talk like this. It's because he knows that any person who's watching this is driven further right by everything this guy is saying. It's so incoherent, so incongruent.
Because you want to push white supremacy and because you want to make your check. It does great for you. Meanwhile, people like me have to live with the consequences of all of your rhetoric that you put on a daily basis. And including my entire community and the intersectionalities of black women. Like, what is wrong with you, dude? I've never seen such a party just completely the American idea.
Narcissism. On full display. It may not get more narcissistic than this. Ben Shapiro's letting him talk because he's proving in real time that the left is fraudulent. They invert reality. This is an embarrassment to the entire left.
We believe in as a country is not what is because of all of the diversity we've had.
Pause.
Pleasure to meet you.
There's a lot of tension in the room now. Let's stay cordial. Let's stay respectful, please. Please, please.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you. So let's say that I'm voted out by my friends here, and I stand up and immediately collapse onto the ground. Paramedics rush in, and through some magical means, they determine that the only person who can save my life is you. You can do that by giving me a transplant. Mm-hmm. Can you be forced to give me a transplant?
I cannot.
Why?
Because I do not have a parental relationship with you, and thus I do not owe you a duty of care in the same way that I would if, say, you were my son.
Can a
If my
parent be
son-
forced to give a
There it is.
kid a transplant?
Yes, a parent can be forced to give a kid an enormous number of resources, or should be.
Can you be forced to give me blood?
No.
Do you believe that the average person should be able to be forced by the government to do something with their body?
So what he just did, he got owned on every single presupposition he brought forward, and then realized that and tried to broaden the hypothetical so that it's meaningless.
It depends because that
Why
that
can
is
you
the
not be
nature of
forced
law.
to give me? Why can you not be forced to give me an organ?
Because I do not owe you a duty of care sufficient to remove an organ.
Because
from
you
me.
cannot be forced to use your body to sustain my own. And
No. The reason is actually what Ben just said.
that is the crux of
Because
the
I do not
abortion
owe you a
argument.
duty to
Because
care.
you cannot be forced to use your body to sustain my own, and that is the crux of the abortion argument. And the problem is, and it's very morally
You're ignoring the
inconsistent.
parental relationship.
Because there's a point here. There's a very morally inconsistent part to your argument right here. If you do not believe that you should be forced to sustain my body using your own, then you should also not believe that a woman should be forced to sustain a child that they do not want to carry.
So this guy thought that this argument would work, in the shower when he rehearsed this, but forgot that he's talking to a guy that can actually interpret arguments on a greater than level 1 logic landscape. That's of course what happened here, and his entire argument is now invalid because Ben Shapiro referenced the duty of a parent versus the duty of a random citizen.
In utero is the same basic argument.
Well-
it doesn't matter how you get there. Let's say that you crash into me on the way out of here.
Well, no, it's
if you
actually-
hit
it's not
into
the-
me.
it's actually
Yes,
not
it
the
is,
same
but it is. If you say
It
that,
isn't,
let's say that you run into me
Okay.
on the way out of here. If you crash into me, it doesn't matter that that is the reason why I am in that state. You cannot be forced to give me blood. You cannot be forced to give me an organ.
It's irrelevant.
You
Okay,
cannot
that's
be
not
forced to
actually
use your
how
body to
abortion
sustain my
works.
own.
An abortion includes a pre-existing physical connection between the two bodies. So a better example would be the so-called dead violinist example or dying violinist example that was put forward by a philosopher. I can't remember her name. The basic idea there is that you wake up in a room and I'm connected to you, right? And you have some sort of health condition. I'm connected to you and I'm giving you a blood transfusion. And if I remove that, you'll die. Do I have a duty not to remove it? I think there's actually a fairly decent case that I actually do have a duty.
No, you
not
do
to
not.
remove it.
You do not have
Well,
a duty to be
you can't-
forced to. No,
why are you
because
defining my
can-
moral position?
You do not have a duty
My
to
moral
sustain
position is
someone
not
else's
yours,
body
clearly.
using your own.
They've sown the seeds of their destruction over years of disparaging every marker of objective reality to the point where they have no ability to engage with people on a landscape of reality at all.